Hey guys, time for a new album review, this time of the latest Cult of Luna release, Vertikal. If you don't know who Cult of Luna are, admittedly, the only other album I've heard from them is Eternal Kingdom, but from what I've looked up, they are a Swedish post-metal group in the vein of Neurosis and Isis, so if you're familiar with them, I think you should have a clear idea of what this album and their other albums will sound like. So the style of music is very stoner, sludgy, sorta. The music on this album is actually not as sludgy as like Isis or Neurosis, but it's still got sort of that hardcore, stonery sorta sound to it, with more like psychedelic, clean passages. That's just like a summary of post-metal music, period, and it's primarily because of that contrast between the psychedelic clean passages and like the more stoner, hardcore passages that makes me love this kind of music. So anyway, let's talk about the album. So with the introduction to this album called The One, you have an idea that this is going to be leaning more towards the atmospheric ambient side until you hear the next track, I, the Weapon. It just like explodes. And then, like, later on in the track, you actually hear more, like, atmospheric keyboards again, so, like, before when the track, like, just exploded into, like, a stoner hardcore fury, you think your prediction of this being atmospheric was wrong. You thought it was just, like, an early April Fool's joke, and then suddenly you hear the keys again, like, later on in the song, and then it looks like your previous assumption was correct, so, yeah. And that is primarily one of the aspects that I actually really love about this album. It has a very unpredictable nature to it. It sounds a bit more experimental than the previous, more relatively straightforward Eternal Kingdom, even though that had its twists and turns as well. And speaking of unpredictability, some bastard just walked in on me as I was recording my video, so I had to record outside where I'm all alone and I have more time to reflect. So that is when I hate unpredictability, but in the album's case, that's a good thing. This is not. In the album's case, it is. And upon further listening into the album, once I make it to the nearly 20-minute epic of the album, Vicarious Redemption, I'm actually reminded quite a bit of Tool in this song. Like in the very intro, you hear it's very quiet. Much of the melodies are very sparse and haunting for the most part, and the actual title, that shouldn't be such a dead giveaway now, wouldn't it? And I love how like spacey and more futuristic this album sounds. I guess they're going for like a more, this is like a concept album in the vein of like Metropolis or something. I think it's based off of the 1920s novel of Metropolis. Ironic considering I'm filming in front of a dorm that was built in like the 1960s. That's far from modern, as you can see. It looks all dated and shit. But anyway, that is beside the point. And fuck the bitches that were just screaming in the middle of my recording. I'm not gonna re-record this because, well, I want to move on. But yeah. And speaking of the more futuristic sounding quality of this album, I guess they also go back to like a more 80s, new wavy, post-punk sort of sound in some songs, like bringing back some of the 80s sounding keyboards and I guess some of the 80s post-punk sounding guitars at times. Like, there's actually one song in here called Synchronicity that I feel actually retains some of those new wavy post-punk elements, just doing it in their own way. It's not like they're covering Tears for Fears or anything like that. It's just like retaining some of those new wavy elements in the post-punk or the post-metal style. And fun fact, Synchronicity is going to be turning 30 this year. Synchronicity by the Police. I know that's unrelated, but figured I'd mention that. Overall, I really do enjoy this release. I'd give it about an 8.25 out of 10. It starts to drag a little bit after Synchronicity, just a little bit, so I kind of lose my attention just for that amount of time, but I mean, the flow of the album as a whole is really good. It's just, it starts to drag a little bit after the 5th track, so that's all I have to say. Definitely check out Vertikal by Cult of Luna. It's very much worth your purchase, and yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you later.